So yesterday, Secretary Rollins put out a press conference, and I wanted to play this real quick because I had a lot of comments about this on yesterday's video.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity to explain that. So the fact that the Democrats are saying, but wait, USDA has money in their accounts, why it is really their fault, I've seen it over and over and over from some of their leaders, is absolute false, and it is a lie. We have been saying on October 10th, we sent messages out. On October 24th, we sent messages out. These benefits end on November 1st. Now, let me get down into a little bit of the details on that to better explain. So there is a contingency fund at USDA, but that contingency fund, by the way, doesn't even cover, I think, half of the $9.2 billion that would be required for November SNAP, but it is only allowed to flow if the underlying program is funded. It's called a contingency fund, and by law, contingency fund can only flow when the underlying fund is flowing. So, for example, if today the Democrats say, "Oh, never mind, sorry, we'll open the government," and SNAP flows, Hurricane Melissa or one of the hurricanes hits, that's the contingency fund that we would use to send more money into the vulnerable communities that are harmed by a specific event like a hurricane. But it is a contingency fund that can only flow if the underlying appropriation is approved. And listen, even if it could flow, it doesn't even cover half of the month of November. So here we are again in 2 weeks having the exact same conversation.
So I agree with what Secretary Rollins is saying. I don't necessarily agree with what the federal court judges ruled. And I think it's actually a very unsafe move from the federal court judges, because what happens to that contingency reserve when we head into the winter months and a winter storm hits, let's say early winter, November, December, what's going to happen when there's an emergency and we need to have that contingency fund? It's a yearly fund. So once it's spent, it's gone. And like she said, in 2 weeks, we're going to be back in the same position. And from what I can gather from every resource I have studied and looked at, there's only about a 50% chance that we end the government shutdown in November the way that things are going. This ACA thing, and in my opinion, what is Big Pharma holding our entire country hostage over the funding of ACA, which is a bad program. It needs to be redone completely. In my opinion, they will continue to hold us hostage through most of November. You have to remember, we have Thanksgiving coming up. If they don't get this done by mid-November, they're not going to get it done in November. Either way you look at it, right now with the government shutdown, we're talking about $400 million a month not being paid to federal workers. That is a lot of money every single month that people aren't getting, they're not spending. For small businesses, for anybody who relies on holiday sales to make a living. I mean, a lot of retail spending happens over the holidays. It's not going to happen, not when people are not getting their paychecks. And it's like one guy was saying to me, once they get it, they get taxed the heck out of it because the back pay is so high. This is actually pretty impactful, and it's a serious thing. And even if they pay SNAP benefits in November, you're looking at like 50%, maybe 60%. What they should do probably is not pay it to people who are not legal citizens. I'm not sure that the courts ruled that people who aren't here legally should be getting it. And I think that whole thing is kind of messed up, because I can tell you from somebody who had to get SNAP at one point in time as a stepping stone, I didn't like it, because they investigate every single aspect of your life. They look into every single bank account you have. It was the most invasive thing I ever went through. And I mean, we could have stayed on it much longer than we did, but we found a way off it because, man, like, I don't know why anybody would choose that, but it's very unfair to Americans for somebody to come into this country illegally and just sign up for it. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. What I wanted to talk about today is the USA beef plan. Secretary Rollins last week released a beef plan. There was a lot of people upset about Trump importing 4 times the beef from Argentina. And they say they're doing it to bring prices down. I mean, from Argentina alone, I'm not sure that it would have that much of an impact on beef prices. So a lot of the Argentina beef it's lean beef that goes into ground beef to make the ground beef leaner. because we fatten our cows up here in the United States. We like those prime steaks. But I don't think it's going to have a huge impact necessarily, but it does have an impact, not for the consumer, okay? It's not going to impact the consumer, but it will have an impact for our ranchers. And we're in a state right now where the beef herd is so low, we need ranchers to have the wherewithal to invest in regrowing America's beef herd. This is about food security, which is a national security issue. And if we keep with the status quo, where ranchers, I mean, basically every time beef prices get hit high in the store, they fix it by importing a bunch of meat products, which just hurts American ranchers. And so we have this system, this cycle to protect consumers that actually in the long term hurts them even more because it takes away consumer choice. It consolidates that power into the meat packers who are importing the beef much cheaper from other countries. And it's continuing to push the American rancher to the brink. They can't seem to get a break, you know, and they have to get a break in order to get ahead. That's just the way economies work. They're not always fair. Life isn't always fair. And to be honest with you, you know, there was a lady the other day, a congressman, I don't know who this is, but they wanted to introduce a bill, a kind of universal income, allowing each family to get enough money a month to at least cover a 2-bedroom apartment. Well, I don't know what 2-bedroom apartment is where you are, but where we are, which I wouldn't say is one of the most expensive places, it's like $2,000 a month. Could you imagine giving every U.S. family $2,000 a month? This is your basic universal income. Grocery prices would be double within a month because that's the way inflation works. You pump too much money. And I don't even know where they think they're going to get this much money from. The U.S. government is broke. So let's come out. I mean, SNAP, which is $9.8 billion a month or 9.2, whatever it is. But SNAP it only equates to a couple $100 a head for all the 42 million people that are on SNAP. Imagine giving out a couple $1,000s per family. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion. People have these ideas. Universal income has never worked. It has always destroyed countries. And unfortunately, the way society works, the way economies work, you've got to have some sort of inequality across the spectrum. I am not a rich guy. I'm not the poorest guy. But because there are opportunities to become wealthier, there's opportunities for productivity, there's opportunities to move ahead. The second you tax the rich, you lose a bunch of jobs and people stop working. I mean, it creates a dysfunctional society. Everybody is calling for a much colder, stormier winter. What does that mean for you? Well, it means that there could be possible power outages and some very long, dark days, because as you know, the days are only getting shorter from here on out. Yanasa Trading Co. has finally launched its Bee Yard collection. We currently have natural beeswax candles for sale on Yanasa Trading Co. These candles last about 10 hours each. They're clean burning. Unlike paraffin candles that put toxins into the air, beeswax candles actually help neutralize the air. We only use beeswax candles in our household because we care about our health, we care about our children's health, and we like the smell of warm honey in the dead of winter. Check out Yanasa Trading Co. and order your beeswax candles today. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to beef. Okay, so importing the beef isn't going to impact retail prices. The only people that it will impact are the ranchers, because we're going to be buying less meat from the ranchers here in the United States. It's going to drive the cost of their beef down, but not significantly enough to offset, you know, the Argentina costs of importing. So you're still going to have this expensive cycle at the grocery store. It doesn't do anything for anybody there. And the Senate just passed a bill too that I think it won't go anywhere. If it does, I'm sure it will probably get vetoed, but they're trying to end the 50% add-on tariff to Brazil, which is actually helping beef producers here in the United States because we're importing less beef from Brazil. Argentina and Brazil are huge import markets for the beef industry. I don't think that bill is actually going to go anywhere. From what I understand, Congress has already made it clear that they're not going to discuss any bills and interact with Trump's tariffs. And there's a lot of talk about tariffs, and you know, it's like in a free market, yeah, tariffs are bad, but we got to become realistic here. We don't live in a free market. We don't control what other countries do. And the tariffs have taken advantage of the United States for years from other countries. And so you can't just not play the game at this point in time. Secretary Rollins has released a beef plan, and this is actually probably one of the better plans that I have seen in a very, very long time. She wants to reopen 24 million acres of federal grazing land. We saw a lot of this, taken away from ranchers over the last administration. My concern with this is that for a rancher to take a grazing lease, there's a significant amount of investment that has to go into that land, putting up fencing. And as we know, a lot of that fencing was taken down under the last administration. So you're talking about a lot of infrastructure that has to be put in place, put those animals on the land. And then you have this uncertainty that the next guy that gets in office is suddenly going to come in and take away grazing rights. So there's not a good enough incentive, in my opinion, for somebody to want to make that investment. There's no safety net there. So I think there has to be more than just say, hey, we're reopening all this land for grazing. We're going to put leases on it. We're going to put cows on it. That's a great long-term plan because it's not going to happen tomorrow. But there needs to be some protections put in place on those grazing leases. There needs to be a way of solidifying that if a rancher goes out and invests in a grazing lease, invests in the infrastructure that is needed for that there's going to be opportunities for lease renewal, that there's going to be opportunities for lease tenure that right now I think a lot of ranchers kind of feel is constantly under threat. They're also talking about cutting inspection fees for small processors. I think this is a great first step. I think that small processors have been continuously made to live up to standards pretty similar to the large processors, but they shouldn't have to live up to those standards. They're not processing 4,000 animals a day. Their chances of getting E. coli aren't the same as one of the large processors. So cutting fees for smaller processors is a good start in deregulation. I like that move. Fund new regional slaughterhouses. This is something that they have done numerous times in the past, but the amount of money that I generally see going into new regional slaughterhouses and small slaughterhouses is a drop in the bucket compared to the industry size. And it hasn't done a very good job of freeing up the market over the years. It's a right step, it's just not big enough. And in order to improve that, I think they need to simplify the process. I think that they should start looking into doing more, with the smaller processors, providing more accessibility for the smaller farmers. And I'm going to get into some of those numbers here in a minute because I think that you can solve a lot of America's beef prices right here in the United States. You can solve a lot of our problem right here in the United States. So it does start with those smaller processor fees dropping. It does start with more regional investment, but that regional investment needs to be meaningful. It hasn't been meaningful in the past. It was a joke in the past. Now, something else she's doing, and I think that this is a good start as well, but there's a difference between cool and what she's doing. But she is requiring truth in labeling. So if the beef is not a product of the USA, it shouldn't have it on the label. You have to remember, a lot of this beef being shipped in from Argentina is being mixed with beef from the USA. It's lean beef being mixed into burger patties. So how does that labeling work? Is it truthful to say that beef was raised here in the United States? Or is it untruthful to say it was raised here in the United States? I guess it depends on the mix. Are you going to start putting on the label X percentage Argentine beef, X percentage USA beef? And so, they're not requiring that. They're just saying, hey, if the product wasn't grown here in the US, you can't put that on the label. I think you guys kind of see where I'm going with this. It's not going to make that much difference on labeling. Whereas I think for truth in labeling, you should say the country or countries of origin where that package came from. That should be on the label. People should know who they're supporting, who they're buying from, because there are different practices around the world. The way that farmers raise their cattle in Argentina and Brazil and Australia, I think are great producers. I personally wouldn't have a problem buying beef from Australia, but we need to be able to look at, where this beef is coming from, how the animal was raised, and consumers should be able to buy based on their convictions of what they want to be supportive of and what they're not interested in supporting. But here's the reality that I would like to touch on, and that is that thousands of cattle producers here in the United States already have their beef processed at USDA and state inspected facilities across the country. And a lot of that beef is packaged and sealed just the same way as inspected beef is, but it is packaged for no resale. And that's because of licensing. In my opinion, these licensing rules are protecting the big wholesalers, because what is the difference? It's processed at the same facility, it's inspected at the same facilities, but it's packaged for not resale, for individual use, no resale. In most states, you have to have what they call a meat handler's license. That license is required to pick up meat from a state or USDA inspected facility and transport it to your consumer. Now, this doesn't apply for those of you who are packaging meat with a meat handler's license, giving that meat to the Postal Service to transfer to a consumer on the other side of the country. For whatever reason, the UPS, USPS, they're not required to have a meat handler's license, but the guy that's picking it up in the cooler at the USDA facility is required to have a meat handler's license to go across town. To get this meat handler license, they're often required to have some sort of commercial storage building with coolers and freezers in it, even if the meat never goes back to their farm, even if they're just delivering it straight to their consumer, their buyer. And sometimes, you have to have that facility and all of your freezers and everything inspected by the USDA and the state to get the license. Tell me how many small farmers are willing to go through this much trouble. Now, I'm not in office in any kind of way, but if I were to run, I would say deregulation done right here. I understand that everybody has to have licenses for things. There has to be oversight. The government needs to completely control our lives. That's just part of the way things are. But why not, if we are truly in this beef crisis to the point where we have to import 4 times the beef from Argentina to help out a consumer by a few pennies, because it's not going to make that much of a difference at the grocery store. It's just hammering U.S. ranchers. Why don't we just deregulate a little bit more, okay? Or why don't we change the licensing structure? So like, for example, you can get a delivery license where you're a farmer, you sell your beef. When the beef is ready, or your hog is ready, or whatever your animal you're having processed, lamb is ready, you can pick it up. You have a license to deliver it in a cooler to the end consumer same day. Boom. Right there, you unlock a significant amount of potential within the marketplace. I know tons of farmers who don't have a meat handler's license, don't want to get in trouble, so they just don't do it. But if they could pick up the meat and take it directly to their end buyer, because a lot of buyers don't want to have to drive out to these remote locations where these slaughterhouses are to pick up their meat. If they could offer that service to their buyers, they would make a significant amount of money. And it would add a significant amount of protein to the marketplace. We'll get to those numbers in a minute. With drop shipping, I was just talking about this. There are people shipping meat, to customers around the country, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think, as we become into this digital age, your communities, you have online communities, you have, local communities. There's nothing wrong with wanting to support your local community and receive beef from them. So if you have to have a license to bring it back to your farm and package it and ship it across the country, but the shipping companies aren't required to have a license, one of the things that we could do is allow USDA facilities to offer that as a service to farmers. They offer a storage fee that, farmers could pay, increase storage capacity through some of this funding that she's talking about, and allow, a facility to offer a drop shipping service for a farmer to be able to ship their meat across the country. Now, if you're smart, you can make this work so that you're selling online, and as you're having animals processed, they get shipped out the same day. I'm sure that somebody has thought about this from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but I'm sure that the licensing burdens with the USDA just make it impossible for them to do that. So at least open the door for it. You might find some people being very creative, some processors, some local USDA processors being creative with ways that they can expand their business model by not just increasing their slaughter capacity, but increasing their storage capacity to offer a shipping service to other customers. I'm not saying everybody's going to want to do that, but it's another way, another opportunity. I also think there's got to be a way to allow farms to have meat handlers licenses with a shared facility. So for example, if like 3 or 4 farmers came together and said, we want to build this facility, we want to put freezers in it, we're splitting the costs. I think that might be legal in some states, but it might not be legal in all places. But just, clarification of that and making that an option. And I think that it would be helpful to have some sort of national cooler standards, so that it's a standard that can replace state standards across the board to make it just simpler for people to understand. So I said, let's talk about the numbers, okay? So there are over 600,000, about 622,000 cattle farmers across the United States. Most of these cattle farmers have less than 50 cows. If you look at, how many farms there are in the United States, there's a lot of small farms and you have these big mega farms, right? These big mega ranches. But there's a lot of small ranches with fewer than 50 cows. And these are the ranchers who are really kind of left out by the licensing system. If you figure just 5% of those farms being able to sell direct, you deregulate enough that just 5% could sell direct to consumer. And each of them sold, let's say, just 5 more animals a year. I mean, we're not talking big numbers here. That's 155,000 head of additional cattle going into the protein supply. And like I said, this also applies to pork, lamb, all the other proteins. Deregulation would impact all of us all the way down the board. And I'm talking 5%, 155,000 more head of cattle. That's 77 million more pounds of beef. And I know we're talking about trillions of pounds when we're dealing with Argentina, but I'm also just throwing out a number of 5%. Now you combine that with everything that Rollins put out in her white paper, which is fantastic. I think it's the best thing we've seen in a long time. You combine that with that program, and within a few years, you have a boom in production, a boom in protein availability. I think we're looking at numbers like in the 500 million pounds of more beef in the marketplace in a short period of time. So you could quickly turn around and increase, I think, the national supply by 2% a year. Working with American farmers and ranchers through deregulation, we've seen an 8% drop since 2019. And that's where you're seeing the beef prices go up. So some of these numbers, they sound insignificant. They don't sound that big. But when you actually kind of dig into it and you start looking at all the different pieces to it, it doesn't take I mean, you can do it without having to import a bunch of stuff from another country. It is very doable. And the consumer ends up having way more options. If they're able to buy direct from farms, and buying bulk, it does take a lot of money up front, but you do save a lot from all the cuts and pieces that you're buying at the grocery store. We processed a cow last winter. I mean, we're still eating at it. Bottom line, guys, what Secretary Rollins put out, that her white paper for the American beef plan, is actually a pretty good plan. I think it needs to go a little further. I think they really need to focus on looking at what they can do to deregulate the market and allow some of these small local farms, family farms, to have better access to the market. And that does include some of the things that she's talking about, investing in more regional facilities and investing in expansion. In New Hampshire, they've got cows. They're waiting a year to get their cows processed.
Bill Schroeder has been farming for more than 50 years. His Schroeder Farm in South Newbury, with its 30 head of cattle, is a popular spot for locals to pick up fresh, locally raised meat products.
They like being able to get it. They like to know where it comes from.
But local beef faces an obstacle, one that lawmakers in Concord have been grappling with for years. There aren't enough USDA-inspected slaughterhouses in New Hampshire, making it difficult for smaller farms to get a hoof in the door.
We only have 4 USDA facilities in New Hampshire. These farmers have to schedule a year to 2 years out. They don't even know what's going to be born.
The House Environment and Agriculture Committee is working on a bill that could mount a direct challenge to USDA control of locally produced meat, allowing for custom slaughtering to produce meat that can be sold only within New Hampshire. Reps say the demand is there, pointing to the way more eateries are highlighting where they get their food.
They have a blackboard that they put up and they say where they got their hamburger from and where they got their produce from.
But there's a catch. If and when this moves forward, the farm or farms that go against USDA regulations are likely to face a federal crackdown.
So this is a real problem. What I'm telling you guys is that this is a significant problem. You're paying higher at the grocery store because of regulations, because of over-regulation. And as long as we keep importing stuff from other countries, that's the other thing, is these processing facilities are expensive. You have got to let the market fix itself, correct itself, by creating a period of time where it might be a little more expensive, but those investment dollars can roll into a more constructive system for the United States. You could have more people going out there, building beef processing plants, increasing our supply, increasing our numbers, investing in this leased land. All of that is good. It's all in Rollins' plan. The Argentina deal was a bit of a step backwards, big step backwards in my opinion, but it's not enough. It's not going to be enough. You want to increase it, you've really got to kind of step on the big boys a little bit and say, you know what, we're going to open the door for the small guys. If you truly support American ranchers, start local, buy direct, even if it means you have to go pick up your meat yourself at the local processor, even if it means you might have to join a local herd share.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.